The acid hit my daughter's face before I could move. Time slowed as Emma's scream shattered the morning air, her hands flying up to protect herself too late. Karen stood there, empty bottle still gripped in her manicured hand, a look of righteous satisfaction on her face as my child collapsed to her knees. "There," she declared, clipboard clutched to her chest. "Now you will have to remove that eyesore." I abandoned all judicial restraint as I rushed to my daughter, her skin already blistering under the caustic chemical. In that moment, I was not Federal Judge Richard Montgomery, respected interpreter of our nation's laws. I was simply a father watching his disabled child suffer at the hands of a woman who had no idea she had just committed multiple federal crimes in front of someone who knew exactly how to ensure she received the maximum punishment possible. This was not going to end with a neighborly compromise or a stern warning. This was going to end with justice. Morning light streamed through the specially installed windows, casting warm patterns across our breakfast table. I adjusted Emma's positioning device as she ate her toast, careful not to disturb the medical equipment she would need for the day. My daughter beamed at me across the table, her 16 years of resilience shining in her eyes despite the cerebral palsy that had challenged her body since birth. "Are you nervous about your first day at the new school?" I asked, placing her medication beside her juice glass. Emma straightened her posture as much as her condition allowed. "Not really. After everything we have been through, this is just another fresh start." Her voice carried the same quiet determination that had seen her through countless surgeries and therapies. "I am Federal Judge Richard Montgomery. For 2 decades, I have interpreted our nation's laws and delivered verdicts that have shaped legal precedent. But no responsibility has ever matched the weight of raising Emma alone after her mother passed from cancer when Emma was just 4 years old. We had moved to Oakwood Estates for a reason. The neighborhood offered ideal proximity to Emma's specialized school and the medical facilities she regularly needed. Our custom-modified home represented more than a decade of careful planning, with every accessibility feature meticulously designed to give my daughter independence. The moving van had barely departed when our new neighbors began appearing with welcome baskets and warm introductions. Barbara from next door brought homemade banana bread. Michael across the street, a retired civil rights attorney, offered assistance with any heavy lifting. For the first time in years, I felt we had found a true sanctuary. "Judge Montgomery, we are so pleased to have someone of your stature joining our community," said Elaine Weber as she delivered a potted plant. "Though I should warn you about our monthly HOA meetings, Marjorie runs a tight ship around here." I would meet this Marjorie Winters 1 week later at my first homeowners association meeting. She sat at the head table, immaculately dressed in a beige pantsuit, her blonde hair pulled into a severe bun. The neighbors referred to her simply as Karen when she was out of earshot. Her smile remained firmly fixed as she worked through agenda items with military precision. The mood shifted when she reached new property assessments. Her smile tightened as she clicked to a photograph of my home on the projection screen. "We need to address the unauthorized modifications at 347 Oakwood Drive," she announced, pointing a manicured nail at the wheelchair ramp leading to our front door. The ramp features non-standard coloring and material that violates Section 3.7 of our community guidelines. I raised my hand and stood. Those modifications are ADA-compliant features necessary for my daughter's disability. Federal housing law protects such accommodations. Marjorie's smile never wavered, but her eyes hardened. "We certainly appreciate your situation, Judge Montgomery, but rules exist for a reason. Property values affect everyone." She made a notation on her clipboard. "We will be in touch about acceptable compromises." The meeting continued, but the warmth I had felt from our neighbors had noticeably cooled. Several avoided eye contact. Others offered sympathetic glances. Michael, the retired attorney, approached me afterward. Word of advice from someone who has lived here 5 years: Marjorie does not like being challenged, especially not on legal grounds. She considers this neighborhood her personal kingdom. I smiled politely. I have spent my career ensuring the law protects those who need it most. I do not anticipate any serious issues. That night, as I helped Emma with her evening stretches, I noticed her watching me with concern. "Dad, are we going to have problems here? I heard what you said on the phone about the HOA lady." I gently worked her contracted muscles, buying time before answering. "Nothing for you to worry about. Some people just need reminding about what truly matters in a community." As Emma slept that night, I stood at her bedroom door, watching the gentle rise and fall of her chest. The happiness in her eyes when she had first seen her accessible bathroom and custom bedroom had made all the expense and planning worthwhile. This was supposed to be our sanctuary. I could never have imagined that in seeking peace for my daughter, I had inadvertently placed her directly in the path of someone who would view her very existence as a threat to neighborhood aesthetics. The first official violation notice appeared on our door exactly 3 days after the HOA meeting. The paper was expensive stock, the Oakwood Estates logo embossed in gold at the top. "Notice of noncompliance," it read in bold letters. Below followed a detailed explanation of how our wheelchair ramp violated community standards for exterior architectural harmony and must be repainted and refaced within 14 days. I placed the notice in a new file folder labeled HOA Correspondence. 20 years in the judiciary had taught me to document everything. It would be the first of many such folders. The second notice arrived 5 days later, citing our specialized van with its wheelchair lift as an unconventional vehicle that could not be parked in the driveway for more than 8 hours. The third notice declared the textured walkway we had installed for Emma's safety a non-standard pavement treatment. Each violation notice bore Marjorie Winter's signature, her handwriting becoming increasingly aggressive with each document. I responded to each with calm, detailed letters citing relevant sections of the Americans with Disabilities Act and fair housing regulations. I attached medical documentation proving necessity. I proposed reasonable compromises where possible. Emma noticed the tension despite my efforts to shield her. "Why was that woman taking pictures of our house yesterday?" she asked one afternoon as I helped her from the van after physical therapy. I looked up to see Marjorie across the street, camera in hand, pretending to photograph flowers while clearly documenting our arrival. "Some people have unusual hobbies," I replied, keeping my tone light. That evening, Michael from across the street knocked on our door. His expression was grim as he handed me a glass of scotch on my front porch. "You should know what you are dealing with," he said quietly. "The Ramirez family who lived here before you had a son with autism. Karen targeted them mercilessly, violation notices for sensory equipment in their backyard, complaints about occasional outbursts. They lasted 6 months before selling at a loss." I sipped the scotch, letting its warmth counterbalance the chills settling in my chest. "And before them?" Michael sighed. "The Thompsons had an elderly father with Alzheimer's living with them. Karen complained about his erratic behavior scaring children. The Patels needed a home office for medical reasons. Karen cited business operation violations. There is a pattern." I set down my glass. "Why does nobody stop her?" "Fear," Michael said simply. "She has connections with the city council. The police chief is her brother-in-law, and she has driven out anyone who opposed her. The rest of the board members are basically puppets. The violations escalated. Our mailbox was deemed non-standard height, despite being installed specifically for Emma's reach from her wheelchair. The small garden beds Emma had planted for her therapy were cited for unauthorized vegetation. The security cameras I installed after noticing Marjorie frequently driving past our house were declared invasive technology. I documented everything while trying to maintain normalcy for Emma. She was thriving at her new school despite the growing hostility at home, working on an advanced science project about adaptive technologies that had already earned praise from her teachers. "Dad, Mrs. Winters was at school today," Emma told me one afternoon, her brow furrowed with confusion. "She was talking to my science teacher about my project. She asked if I really did all the work myself or if the school was giving me special accommodation because of my disability." I felt a cold fury building inside me. Taking pictures of our home was one thing. Questioning my daughter's academic integrity crossed into personal territory. The confrontation I had been avoiding finally erupted on a Tuesday evening. Emma had experienced a severe muscle spasm, requiring an ambulance when her medication proved insufficient. As paramedics were loading her into the vehicle, Marjorie appeared on our driveway, clipboard in hand. "This emergency vehicle is blocking the street, which violates Section 5.2 of our community guidelines," she announced, her voice carrying across the yard where neighbors had gathered in concern. "Additionally, this medical event is creating a neighborhood disturbance." I stepped away from Emma's side, approaching Marjorie with a calm that surprised even me. The judicial restraint I had practiced for decades was the only thing containing my fury. "My daughter is having a medical emergency," I said evenly. "Your clipboard can wait." Marjorie sniffed, writing something on her form. "Rules do not cease to exist because of personal problems, Judge Montgomery. The board has discussed your continued noncompliance, and we are considering legal action." Something in me broke. 20 years of measured judicial temperament disappeared in an instant. "Legal action," I repeated, my voice dropping dangerously low. "By all means, Marjorie, pursue that course. I would be fascinated to see how your homeowners association bylaws fare against federal disability protections in court." Neighbors who had gathered to check on Emma stood frozen, watching the confrontation. Marjorie's face flushed crimson. "You are not above the rules just because you wear a robe at work," she hissed. "This neighborhood has standards that will be maintained regardless of your domestic situation." Her eyes flicked dismissively toward Emma. I stepped closer, my voice barely audible. "If you ever again interfere with my daughter's medical care or education, you will discover exactly how thoroughly I understand the law. That is not a threat. That is a promise from a federal judge who has sworn to uphold justice." I turned back to Emma, climbing into the ambulance beside her. As the doors closed, I caught sight of the neighbors' faces, some shocked, some secretly pleased, all now forced to choose sides in what had clearly escalated beyond a simple HOA dispute. My chambers at the federal courthouse had always been my sanctuary, a place where the rule of law prevailed over personal feelings. Now it became command central for what I recognized as necessary legal warfare. I cleared space on my conference table, careful to keep my official caseload separate from what had become a personal crusade for my daughter's rights. "Judge Montgomery, I brought those housing discrimination cases you requested," said Maria, my judicial assistant who had known Emma since birth. She set down a stack of files beside the growing evidence binder. "And the ADA specialist returned your call. She can consult on Thursday." I nodded, examining the photographs I had taken documenting identical violations to ours that remained unsighted on other properties. The blue mailbox 3 doors down that stood at the same height as ours, but had received no violation. The decorative pathway on Marjorie's own property that used the same non-approved material as our accessible walkway. In 20 years on the bench, I never thought I would need to build a case to protect my own child's rights, I told Maria quietly. While I worked, Emma focused on her science project with characteristic determination. She had designed adaptable control interfaces for mobility devices that responded to varying levels of physical capability. The project had already caught the attention of a professor at the nearby university who specialized in assistive technology. "Dad, can we install the prototype on my chair this weekend?" Emma asked, her face lighting up with excitement. "The competition is in 3 weeks, and I need real-world testing data." I smiled, grateful for her resilience. "Absolutely. Nothing is going to interfere with your project." But something was interfering, something I had been investigating quietly. A discreet background check on Marjorie Winters had revealed troubling patterns. 3 previous complaints filed with housing authorities for discriminatory practices, all settled with strict non-disclosure agreements. A brother-in-law in local law enforcement who had helped quash complaints. A neighborhood that had become suspiciously homogeneous under her 12-year HOA presidency. More disturbing were the stories that began emerging as other neighbors cautiously approached me. The Henderson family, who moved after their request for a stair lift for their aging mother, was repeatedly denied. The Kims, who faced daily fines when their child's medical equipment required a generator during power outages. The pattern was unmistakable and methodical. Anyone who did not fit Marjorie's vision of an ideal neighborhood was systematically driven out. I compiled affidavits, photographs, and documentation with the same thoroughness I applied to federal cases. Emma, perceptive as always, noticed my late nights and distracted mornings. "You are building a case against Mrs. Winters, are not you?" she asked one evening, maneuvering her wheelchair into my home office. "I overheard you on the phone with Michael about discrimination patterns." I hesitated, never having lied to my daughter. "I am documenting facts. Mrs. Winters has targeted families like ours before. Knowledge is protection." Emma's expression was thoughtful beyond her years. "She came to my science lab again yesterday. She told my teacher that students with special needs should compete in separate categories because it is not fair to normal students when we get extra help." My pen snapped in my hand, ink staining my fingers. "What did your teacher say?" "Ms. Rivera told her that I do not receive any accommodations for the competition because I have not requested any." Emma smiled slightly. Then she showed Mrs. Winters my preliminary results and asked if she could explain the advanced algorithmic adaptations I had programmed. Mrs. Winters just walked out. Pride momentarily overcame my anger. That is my girl. The HOA notices continued arriving with escalating frequency, each more ridiculous than the last. The height of our mailbox, the color of our curtains visible from the street, the medical alert system sign in our window. I documented each one, gathering evidence of selective enforcement and disability-targeted harassment. I consulted discreetly with colleagues specializing in civil rights and ADA compliance, building a legal foundation while hopping it would never be needed. Michael and several other neighbors formed an informal support network, alerting us when Marjorie was photographing our property or questioning people about us. The rumors began next. Whispers about my competence as a judge, insinuations about Emma's condition being the result of neglect rather than medical circumstances. suggestions that our modifications lowered property values. Each rumor traced back to Marjorie and her closest allies on the board. "You could file now," Michael advised one evening on my porch, reviewing my evidence. "You have enough to establish a pattern of discriminatory harassment." I shook my head, watching Emma through the window as she worked diligently on her project. Filing means publicity. Emma has endured enough medical scrutiny without becoming the center of a discrimination lawsuit. I want to resolve this quietly if possible. Michael looked skeptical. "Richard, I have known Marjorie Winters for 5 years. She does not do quiet resolution. She does victory or scorched earth." I did not know then how prophetic his words would prove to be. I did not realize we were approaching a point where Marjorie's frustration at her inability to drive us away would explode into something unimaginable. I was preparing for a legal battle, carefully building a case with the methodical precision of a career judge. I should have been preparing for war. The morning of Emma's science competition dawned clear and full of promise. 3 weeks of preparation had culminated in a remarkable adaptive technology prototype that allowed mobility device users to control their equipment through minimal muscle movements. For those with progressive conditions like Emma's, it could mean years of additional independence. "Dad, can you help me load the sensor array?" Emma called from the living room where components were arranged in protective cases. Her face shone with excitement, the stress of our ongoing HOA situation momentarily forgotten. I carefully packed her equipment into the specialized van, following her precise instructions for each delicate piece. "Professor Ramirez is meeting us there," I confirmed, referring to the university researcher who had taken interest in Emma's work. "Yes. He thinks there might be development potential if the competition goes well." Emma could not keep the pride from her voice as she directed the placement of the central processing unit she had programmed herself. We worked efficiently, years of practice making our movements synchronized despite Emma's mobility limitations. I had just finished securing the prototype controller when a sharp voice cut through our focused preparation. "Excuse me, Judge Montgomery. This construction project in your driveway is a clear violation of Section 4.3. Marjorie Winters stood at the edge of our driveway, clipboard clutched against her immaculate beige blazer. Her hair was pulled back severely, lips painted a precise red that matched her reading glasses. Behind her stood 2 men I recognized from the HOA board, looking uncomfortable but determined to back their president. I straightened slowly. "Marjorie, my daughter has a major competition today. Whatever concerns you have can wait until tomorrow." "Rules do not take days off," she replied crisply, approaching to inspect the equipment. "This appears to be construction of an unauthorized structure on your property. The bylaws clearly state." "This is scientific equipment for my school project," Emma interrupted, wheeling forward. "We are taking it to the regional science competition. It will be gone all day." Marjorie's gaze slid over Emma with barely disguised distaste. "Nevertheless, Section 4.3 prohibits construction activities visible from the street without prior board approval." She began writing on her clipboard. "This will require immediate removal and a mandatory review." I placed a steadying hand on Emma's shoulder, feeling her tension. "Marjorie, this is not a construction project. This is my daughter's schoolwork and we are already running late. Please step aside so we can finish loading." Her face tightened. "You people think you are above the rules that everyone else follows. This neighborhood has standards, and your continued defiance is unacceptable." "My scientific research is not an HOA violation," Emma said firmly. And we have already received 3 warnings this week about things that nobody else gets cited for. Marjorie's eyes narrowed. I do not appreciate your tone, young lady. Perhaps if your father spent more time teaching you respect instead of enabling special treatment. That is enough, I cut in, my judicial restraint wearing dangerously thin. Step away from our vehicle, Marjorie. We will address any legitimate concerns tomorrow. Something in my dismissal seemed to trigger a breaking point. Marjorie's face flushed dark red, her knuckles whitening around her clipboard. No one dismisses me in my own neighborhood. What happened next occurred with such speed that despite all my years evaluating testimony, I would struggle to recount the precise sequence. Marjorie reached into her large tote bag, extracting a plastic bottle. Her voice rose to a pitch I had never heard before. If you will not comply voluntarily, I will remove the eyesore myself. She unscrewed the cap with frantic movements, her composure completely abandoned. I recognized the bottle as industrial-strength cleaning solution, the kind used for stripping paint and removing graffiti. Before I could process her intent, she lurched forward and flung the contents toward the equipment we had arranged near the wheelchair ramp. Emma, positioned between Marjorie and the equipment, took the full force of the liquid to her face and upper body. Time seemed to stop. The caustic liquid splashed across my daughter's face, neck, and chest. For one frozen moment, there was only shocked silence. Then Emma's scream shattered the morning air, a sound of such primal pain that neighbors appeared instantly on their porches. Emma, I lunged forward, scooping her into my arms as she clawed at her burning skin. My judicial restraint, my carefully cultivated calm, everything disappeared in the face of my child's agony. Medical shower, now! I shouted to Michael, who had run across the street at Emma's scream. I carried Emma toward the accessible bathroom where we had installed an emergency shower for her medical needs, her body convulsing against mine. It burns, Dad, it burns. Emma sobbed, her eyes already swelling shut, angry red patches spreading across her skin where the chemical had made contact. Behind us, Marjorie stood motionless, the empty bottle dangling from her hand. I was aiming for the ramp, she said faintly, as if this explained everything. She moved into the way. Michael was already calling 911 as neighbors gathered in shocked silence. I stripped Emma's contaminated clothes, placing her under the emergency shower as she whimpered in pain. The water running off her body carried a chemical smell that filled the bathroom. Stay with me, Emma, I urged, supporting her weight as the water rinsed her burning skin. Help is coming, stay with me. Paramedics arrived within minutes, though it felt like eternity. Their expressions turned grim as they assessed the chemical burns spreading across Emma's face and upper body. We need to get her to the burn unit immediately, the lead paramedic told me, his voice calm but urgent. These are serious chemical burns. What was the substance? I handed him the bottle Michael had retrieved from where Marjorie dropped it. Industrial strength cleaning solution. Concentrate. As they loaded Emma onto a stretcher, her skin already blistering despite the emergency shower, I heard Marjorie's voice from my front yard where a police officer was questioning her. It was an accident. I was just trying to remove an unauthorized modification. How was I supposed to know she would get in the way? In that moment, something within me transformed. The measured federal judge who had spent decades carefully weighing evidence and considering all perspectives was gone. In his place stood a father whose child had been deliberately harmed by someone who viewed her disability as an aesthetic inconvenience. I kissed Emma's forehead before they loaded her into the ambulance. I will be right behind you, I promised, my voice steady despite the rage building inside me. As the ambulance doors closed, I turned toward where Marjorie stood gesticulating to the police officer, still clutching her clipboard as if it offered protection. She had no idea what she had just done, no conception of the legal storm I would rain down upon her, no understanding that she had just committed multiple federal crimes in front of a judge who knew exactly how to ensure she received the maximum punishment possible. This was no longer about HOA violations or neighborhood aesthetics. This was about justice, and justice was my profession. The burn unit waiting room became my new chambers. I arranged case files on the small table, phone pressed to my ear as I coordinated with colleagues while keeping constant watch on Emma's room. Her face and upper body were covered with specialized bandages, protecting the chemically burned skin beneath. The doctors had been cautiously optimistic about preventing permanent scarring, but the road to recovery would be long and painful. "The district attorney is reviewing the assault charges now," reported James Chen, a former clerk of mine who now worked as an assistant U.S. attorney. "With the chemical analysis and witness statements, we are looking at assault with a caustic substance, at minimum." I nodded, watching through the window as nurses changed Emma's bandages. Despite her injuries, she had insisted her laptop be brought to the hospital so she could continue working on her science project documentation. Her determination simultaneously broke my heart and filled me with fierce pride. "I want the hate crime enhancement," I said quietly. "The evidence clearly shows a pattern of targeted harassment based on disability status." Outside the hospital, media trucks had established a permanent presence. The story had captured national attention. HOA president attacks disabled teen with acid blared across headlines and chyrons. My phone had not stopped ringing with calls from disability rights organizations offering support and legal assistance. I had not sought publicity, but the public outrage served a purpose. This case needed to set a precedent that would protect other families facing similar discrimination. Emma stirred in her hospital bed, and I immediately moved to her side, setting aside legal documents. "Dad," she called, voice raspy from the effects of chemical inhalation during the attack. "I am right here," I assured her, gently taking her hand, careful to avoid the areas of chemical burns. "My project, the competition." Her swollen eyes could barely open, but her concern was clear. "Professor Ramirez collected your equipment. Everything is safe, and he has requested a deferment for your entry. You can present when you are recovered." Emma managed a small smile through her pain. "Did they arrest her?" I nodded. "Yes, she will face serious charges." "Good." Emma's damaged fingers tightened slightly around mine. "Not just for me, for everyone she hurt before." The bail hearing 3 days later provided my first glimpse of Marjorie since the attack. The immaculately composed HOA president had vanished, replaced by a disheveled woman in standard-issue jail clothing. Her expression registered visible shock when the prosecutor announced the charges. "Your Honor, the state charges the defendant with assault with a caustic substance, hate crime targeting disability status, attempted disfigurement of a minor, and multiple violations of federal civil rights statutes," the prosecutor stated firmly. "Given the severity of these charges, which carry combined maximum sentences of 25 years, we request bail be set at $500,000. Marjorie swayed visibly, her attorney steadying her arm. For perhaps the first time, she was confronting the reality that her actions had consequences beyond HOA jurisdiction. The judge set bail at the requested amount, and Marjorie was led away in handcuffs, her expression stunned. I recused myself from any official role in the case, carefully maintaining ethical boundaries while using my knowledge of the system to ensure proper procedures were followed. My colleagues in the judiciary offered quiet support, many having met Emma at courthouse events over the years. The investigation uncovered exactly what I had suspected: 3 previous incidents where Marjorie had engaged in aggressive behavior toward residents with disabilities. All had been quietly settled with non-disclosure agreements and insurance payments. But this time, there would be no quiet settlement. Emma's hospital room became an impromptu headquarters for disability rights advocates. Organizations I had ruled in favor of during my years on the bench now rallied around my daughter, recognizing her case as emblematic of housing discrimination faced by countless families. "We have documented 17 families driven from your neighborhood over the past decade," reported Samantha Weiss, an attorney with the Disability Rights Legal Center. 15 had members with visible disabilities or medical needs. That statistical pattern is damning. Late at night, when Emma slept under the influence of pain medication, I allowed myself moments of guilt. As a federal judge, I had interpreted laws designed to protect people like my daughter, yet I had failed to shield her from hatred in our own home. "I should have acted sooner," I confessed to Michael during one of his hospital visits. "I saw the warning signs but wanted to resolve things properly, officially. My restraint cost Emma dearly." Michael shook his head. "You could not have predicted this level of escalation. No reasonable person would." "But I knew she was targeting Emma specifically," I replied, watching my daughter's chest rise and fall. "I documented everything but did not act decisively enough." The case built with methodical precision. Karen's defense team attempted to frame the incident as an unfortunate accident resulting from community beautification efforts. But security footage from our home and testimony from horrified witnesses dismantled this narrative immediately. As Emma underwent her 3rd painful debridement procedure, I received word that federal prosecutors had declined all plea deal offers from Marjorie's defense team. They intended to pursue maximum penalties, viewing the case as an opportunity to send an unambiguous message about disability rights enforcement. "She offered to plead to simple assault with no jail time," James informed me. The U.S. attorney laughed them out of the room. With the hate crime enhancement and the victim being a minor, the sentencing guidelines are clear. Emma's recovery progressed slowly. The bandages eventually gave way to angry red scars that the doctors assured us would fade with time and treatment. More concerning were the nightmares that woke her screaming, reliving the moment of the attack night after night. Yet through it all, her determination never wavered. From her hospital bed, she continued refining her science project, using her own experience to enhance the adaptive technology she had designed. "This is why it matters," she told a visiting reporter who had been cleared to speak with her. "Independence for people with disabilities is not about convenience. It is about dignity. It is about safety. Our existence is not an eyesore to be removed." Her words, published nationally, became a rallying cry for disability advocates across the country. The daughter I had tried to protect was now protecting others through her courage and clarity. And as Marjorie's trial date approached, that courage would be tested in the most public way possible. The courtroom I had entered thousands of times felt fundamentally different from the other side of the bench. Sitting beside Emma rather than presiding from on high, I experienced the intimidating formality of legal proceedings through new eyes. The polished wood, the state seal, the bailiff's formal announcements, all designed to inspire reverence for the law, now felt like barriers between justice and those who needed it most. "All rise," called the bailiff as Judge Alina Simmons entered. A colleague I had known for 15 years, Alina now avoided my gaze, maintaining appropriate judicial distance from a case with personal connection to a fellow judge. Emma sat beside me in her wheelchair, her scars still visible despite the best efforts of medical treatment. She had insisted on minimal makeup, wanting the jury to see exactly what had been done to her. Her hands trembled slightly, but her voice remained steady during pre-trial preparation. "I want to testify," she had told the prosecutors firmly during our final meeting. "I want her to see me speak for myself." The district attorney had agreed, recognizing the powerful impact Emma's direct testimony would have. Now we watched as Karen's defense team made their opening statements, portraying her as a dedicated community servant who had made one regrettable mistake during an emotionally charged disagreement. Meanwhile, the HOA board had been dissolved by emergency vote after the details of Karen's systematic harassment became public. Community management had been temporarily assumed by court-appointed administrators, while residents worked to establish new bylaws that specifically protected accessibility modifications. Neighbors who had once feared Karen's retaliation now approached me daily with stories of similar harassment. Their testimony would establish the pattern of discrimination that elevated this from simple assault to a hate crime. "We have confirmed 3 families who previously moved away are breaking their NDAs to testify," the prosecutor informed us during a recess. "They say watching Emma's courage made their decision easy." Emma squeezed my hand. "See, Dad, this is bigger than just us now." Karen's defense strategy shifted desperately between multiple contradictory narratives, claiming temporary insanity, then minimizing the chemical's strength, then portraying herself as a dedicated community servant who had been provoked. Her husband, a prominent local businessman, had made thinly veiled attempts to leverage commercial relationships with colleagues in the legal community, discovering too late that the judiciary had closed ranks around one of their own. The most devastating testimony came from families who had previously been driven from the neighborhood. The Ramirez family described how their autistic son had been photographed during meltdowns, with images distributed to neighbors as evidence of disruptive behavior. The Thompsons recounted how their father with Alzheimer's had been reported to Adult Protective Services with false claims of neglect after Karen failed to force their compliance with HOA aesthetics. Through it all, I maintained the perfect balance between supportive father and respected jurist, but privately struggled with seeing the justice system from the victim's perspective, the delays, the technical arguments, the defense tactics attempting to minimize clear harm. "How can you stand it, Dad?" Emma asked one evening after a particularly brutal day of testimony, where the defense had questioned whether her disabilities were as severe as claimed. "You look so calm when they say such terrible things." I considered her question carefully, because I know the truth will prevail. The system is imperfect, but it is designed to find truth through adversarial testing. Emma nodded thoughtfully. "You always said justice is not just about punishment but about restoration. I do not want her life destroyed, Dad. I want her to understand what she did wrong." Her statement humbled me deeply. Despite all my years interpreting law, my greatest lessons in justice were coming from the daughter I thought I was teaching. When Emma's turn to testify arrived, the courtroom fell completely silent. She wheeled herself to the witness stand without assistance, the accommodations I had fought for throughout her life now enabling her testimony against the woman who had attacked her for those very accommodations. "Miss Montgomery," began the prosecutor gently, "can you tell the court what happened on the morning of April 10th?" Emma's voice was clear and unwavering as she described the attack, the burning pain, the months of recovery, and the nightmares that still plagued her. But it was her conclusion that left the courtroom in stunned silence. "Mrs. Winters did not just attack me," Emma stated, looking directly at Karen. "She attacked the idea that people like me deserve to exist in communities like hers, that our adaptations for survival somehow diminish her quality of life, that our visibility is a problem to be solved rather than a reality to be accepted." Karen could not meet Emma's gaze, staring instead at her hands clasped tightly in her lap. "The wheelchair ramp," she objected to. "It lets me enter my own home independently. The van she tried to ban. It lets me attend school and doctor appointments. The textured walkway she called an eyesore. It prevents falls that could leave me hospitalized for months." Emma's voice grew stronger with each example. "None of these accommodations hurt anyone. They simply allow me to exist in the world." When cross-examination came, Karen's attorney approached carefully, clearly recognizing the danger in appearing to attack a disabled teenager who had already suffered visibly. "Miss Montgomery, isn't it possible that Mrs. Winters was simply trying to maintain community standards rather than targeting you specifically?" Emma's response was measured but firm. When someone objects to the tools another person needs to survive, while ignoring identical features used for convenience or aesthetics by non-disabled people. When someone objects to the tools another person needs to survive, while ignoring identical features used for convenience or aesthetics by non-disabled people, that is not about community standards. That is about who they believe belongs in their community and who does not. The defense attorney had no further questions. As Emma wheeled back to our table, I caught her hand briefly, unable to express my pride through the tightness in my throat. Throughout my career, I had heard thousands of testimonies, but none had captured the essence of justice more perfectly than my daughter's simple truth. The defense called character witnesses who spoke of Marjorie's dedication to the community, her volunteer work, her attention to detail. Yet under cross-examination, each inadvertently revealed aspects of her controlling nature, her rigid adherence to her personal vision of propriety, her discomfort with anything that deviated from her narrow definition of normal. When Marjorie herself took the stand, her carefully rehearsed testimony quickly unraveled under precise questioning that forced her to acknowledge the pattern of targeted enforcement against families with disabilities. The prosecutor methodically presented her with side-by-side photographs. Our wheelchair ramp cited for violations, while identical decorative ramps on other properties received no notices. Our textured walkway deemed non-standard, while similar pathways elsewhere were praised as decorative enhancements. "Mrs. Winters, can you explain why you personally took 17 photographs of the Montgomery home in a single week, but conducted no documented inspections of properties without accessibility features during the same period?" the prosecutor asked. Her composed facade crumbled as the evidence mounted. When finally asked about the chemical attack itself, her justifications shifted from claiming it was an accident to suggesting she had been provoked by ongoing noncompliance with HOA regulations. "I just wanted our neighborhood to maintain its standards," she insisted, her voice rising. "Property values affect everyone. Special accommodations for one family impact all of us." And did maintaining property values justify throwing caustic chemicals at a 16-year-old girl? The prosecutor asked quietly. The silence in the courtroom was absolute as the question hung in the air, unanswerable. "Will the defendant please rise?" The courtroom fell silent as Judge Simmons prepared to announce the verdict. 3 weeks of testimony had led to this moment. Marjorie Winters stood rigidly beside her attorney, her once imperious posture now brittle with tension. On the charge of assault with a caustic substance, the court finds the defendant guilty. On the charge of hate crime targeting disability status, guilty. On attempted disfigurement of a minor, guilty. On violation of federal civil rights statutes, guilty. Each pronouncement fell like a gavel strike. Emma gripped my hand tightly as the full weight of vindication washed over us. This was not about revenge. This was about establishing that people with disabilities deserve full protection under the law. Judge Simmons continued, her voice carrying the formal gravity I recognized from my own years on the bench. This court now moves to sentencing phase. The sentencing hearing 2 weeks later balanced punishment with rehabilitation in a way that reflected my own judicial philosophy. Marjorie received 5 years imprisonment, extensive community service with disability organizations upon release, and mandatory education in disability rights. Outside the courthouse, Emma faced the assembled media with remarkable poise, her visible scars a testament to resilience rather than victimhood. "Today is not about revenge," she stated clearly into the forest of microphones. "It is about establishing that people with disabilities have the right to exist in communities without fear. We have the right to modifications that allow us independence. We are not eyesores to be removed." 6 months after the attack, Emma's delayed science project finally had its moment. Her adaptive control interface, refined during her recovery with insights from her own changing mobility needs, won not just the regional competition but national recognition. The technology she had developed had potential applications for thousands with similar challenges. "The foundation has approved your initial development grant," Professor Ramirez informed her as they reviewed